I found out my partner complains about me to her ex, and they still talk almost every day. I found the first message at 3:18 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and I wasn't even snooping. My girlfriend Olivia's phone lit up on the nightstand while she slept beside me, and I only glanced over because the vibration had startled me awake. The preview was innocent enough, just a heart emoji and the name Alex at the top. What made my stomach twist was that it was the third notification from Alex that night, and each one had come through with the special chime Olivia had set for important contacts. I'd heard that sound maybe 5 times in the 8 months we'd been together, always for her mom or her boss. Never at 3 in the morning, never 3 times in a row. I laid there staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was nothing, that Alex could be anyone, that I was being paranoid. But my hands were already shaking, and some part of me knew that when morning came, nothing would ever be the same. Olivia and I had met through mutual friends at a craft brewery in Portland about 9 months earlier. She was an elementary school teacher with this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile, and I was a software developer who'd spent the last 3 years building a stable, if somewhat boring, life after a messy divorce. We clicked immediately, shared the same dark humor, loved hiking on weekends, and could talk for hours about everything from philosophy to the best pizza toppings. She moved into my apartment after 6 months, and I'd started looking at engagement rings the week before that Thursday night. I thought I knew her completely. I thought we told each other everything. The first red flag had actually appeared 2 months into our relationship, but I'd dismissed it entirely. Olivia mentioned her ex-boyfriend in passing, said they'd broken up 3 years ago but remained friends. His name was Alex, and he worked in graphic design somewhere across the country in Boston. "We just check in sometimes," she'd said with a casual shrug. "Make sure we're both doing okay. It's totally platonic." I'd nodded, feeling mature and secure for not being the jealous type. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I became the idiot in my own story. The morning after that 3 a.m. message, I made coffee and tried to act normal. Olivia shuffled into the kitchen around 7, already dressed for school in the floral dress I'd complimented a dozen times. "Morning, babe," she said, kissing my cheek before grabbing her travel mug. I watched her scroll through her phone while she drank, saw her smile at something on the screen, watched her fingers fly across the keyboard in response. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She looked up, startled. "What? Yeah, totally fine. Just responding to Jenna about our girls' night this weekend." She poured her coffee, grabbed her bag, and was out the door in under 3 minutes. I stood in the empty kitchen, knowing with absolute certainty that she'd just lied to me. My colleague David noticed something was off when I arrived at the office that morning. We'd been friends since my first day at the tech startup, and he had this annoying ability to read people. "You look like someone kicked your dog," he said, rolling his chair over to my desk. I wanted to brush it off, but the words came tumbling out instead. I told him about the messages, about the timing, about the lie. David's expression shifted from concern to something darker. "Man, I hate to say this, but you need to know what's actually going on. Don't accuse her of anything yet, but pay attention. Trust, but verify." I spent that entire day distracted, my code full of errors, my mind running through every interaction with Olivia, searching for other signs I'd missed. That weekend, Olivia went out for her girls' night, and I did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop. The password was my birthday. She'd told me that months ago, said she had nothing to hide. Her email was still logged in, and I felt like a criminal as I typed Alex into the search bar. 342 results. My chest tightened. The emails went back years, but what destroyed me were the recent ones. Dozens of messages over the past 8 months, the entire duration of our relationship. I started reading, and each message felt like a blade. "He doesn't get me the way you did," she'd written 4 months ago. "I love him, but sometimes I wonder if we're really compatible." Another one from 6 weeks ago. "We got into a fight about my job. You would have understood immediately why I was upset. He just tried to solve the problem instead of listening." And then, from 2 weeks ago, "I know we can't be together because of the distance, but talking to you makes me happier than anything else in my life." I sat there, staring at the screen, reading message after message where my girlfriend dissected every argument we'd had, every moment of friction, every private, vulnerable thing I'd shared, and laid it all out for her ex-boyfriend like she was preparing a case against me. The worst part wasn't even what she said about me. It was how Alex responded, always validating her complaints, always positioning himself as the superior alternative, always ending with, "I'm here for you whenever you need me, Liv. You know that." I didn't confront her immediately. I should have, but something in me needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Over the next week, I noticed everything. How she'd smile at her phone during dinner, then quickly flip it over when I looked. How she'd take calls from Jenna in the bedroom with the door closed, speaking in low tones I couldn't make out. How she started picking fights over insignificant things, the dishes, my work schedule, the way I folded laundry, almost like she was building ammunition for her next message to Alex. On Wednesday evening, exactly 9 days after I'd found that first late-night message, I came home early from work with flowers and her favorite Thai takeout, planning to finally talk to her about everything. She wasn't expecting me until 8. I found her on the couch, laptop open, video chatting with someone. When she heard the door, She slammed the laptop shut so fast it nearly broke. "You're home early," she said, her face pale. "Who was that?" I asked, setting down the flowers. "Nobody. Just work stuff." The lie was so obvious it was almost insulting. "Olivia, I need you to be honest with me right now. Was that Alex?" Her expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally anger. "Have you been spying on me? That's so controlling, Nathan. I'm allowed to have friends." That's when something in me snapped, not into rage, but into cold clarity. Friends don't lie to their partners about daily conversations. Friends don't seek emotional intimacy with their exes while complaining about their current relationship. I've read the emails, Liv. All of them. The fight that followed lasted 3 hours. She cried, accused me of violating her privacy, said I was making something innocent into a betrayal. "It's not physical," she kept saying, as if that made it acceptable. "We're just friends. You're overreacting." I asked her to show me her phone, to let me see the messages from that week. She refused. I asked her to stop talking to Alex entirely if our relationship mattered to her. She said I was being unreasonable, that she shouldn't have to give up a friendship because I was insecure. Around midnight, I told her I needed space to think, that she should stay with a friend for a few days. She left with a hastily packed bag, tears streaming down her face, telling me I was throwing away something beautiful over nothing. I spent that night going through everything again, screenshotting the emails, documenting the timeline. Some dark instinct told me I'd need evidence later, though I didn't know why yet. I reached out to my divorce attorney, Patricia Nguyen, who'd helped me navigate the end of my marriage 3 years earlier. She'd transitioned into relationship counseling and mediation, and I trusted her judgment. "Document everything," she said when I called her office the next morning. "I've seen cases like this escalate in unexpected ways. Protect yourself." I didn't understand what she meant until Friday afternoon, when Olivia's best friend Jenna called me, furious. "How could you kick Olivia out?" she demanded. "She told me everything about your jealousy, how you went through her private messages, how you're trying to isolate her from her friends. That's abusive behavior, Nathan." My blood ran cold. "Did she tell you she's been having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend for our entire relationship? Did she mention that part?" The silence on the other end stretched out for several seconds. That's not what she said," Jenna finally responded, her voice uncertain now. "She said you found one message from an old friend and lost it. I sent Jenna 3 screenshots, not the worst ones, but enough to show the pattern. Read these and tell me if I'm overreacting." 10 minutes later, Jenna called back. "Nathan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She made it sound completely different." That's when I started to understand the depth of the problem. Olivia wasn't just having an emotional affair. She was actively rewriting reality to protect herself, casting me as the villain in a story where she was the victim of my supposed controlling behavior. Over the weekend, I learned that she'd told her parents I'd become jealous and paranoid, that she'd posted vague messages on social media about learning who someone really is, and that she'd called my sister Melissa to tell her she was worried about my mental health. Each revelation felt like another punch. Melissa, thank God, knew me well enough to question the narrative. "That doesn't sound like you at all," she said when she called. "What's actually going on?" I explained everything, sent her some of the evidence, and she immediately offered to come stay with me for support. "I've seen this before," she said. Melissa worked as a therapist specializing in relationship dynamics. It's called DARVO: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. When people get caught doing something wrong, they flip the script to make themselves the injured party. You need to be careful, Nathan. This could get worse before it gets better. Melissa arrived on Saturday morning with enough supplies to camp out in my guest room for a week. She'd taken emergency leave from her practice, concerned about both my emotional state and what she kept calling the escalation pattern. I thought she was being overdramatic until Sunday evening, when 2 police officers knocked on my door. "Nathan Whitmore?" the older officer asked, his hand resting casually near his belt. "We received a call about a domestic disturbance at this address." My stomach dropped. "There's no disturbance. I live here alone. Well, my sister's visiting, but that's it." The officer's partner, a younger woman with sharp eyes, glanced past me into the apartment. "Is Olivia Chen here?" My brain stuttered over the name. "You mean Olivia Grant? My girlfriend?" "No, she moved out Thursday night. Wait, she called you?" The older officer's expression softened slightly. "Someone called from her phone, said her boyfriend was holding her possessions hostage and making threats. Said she was afraid to come get her things." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Melissa appeared behind me, her therapist voice calm and authoritative. "Officers, I'm Nathan's sister, Dr. Melissa Whitmore. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I've been here since yesterday morning. I can confirm that Olivia Grant hasn't been here, and my brother hasn't made any threats. In fact, he's been trying to peacefully end their relationship after discovering evidence of infidelity." The officers exchanged glances. "Do you have any documentation of that?" the female officer asked. I pulled out my phone, showed them the screenshots of the emails, the timeline I'd created. "I can also provide my attorney's contact information if you need verification that I've been handling this appropriately." The officers spent 20 minutes verifying my story, talking to Melissa, examining the apartment. Eventually, they seemed satisfied that the call had been, at minimum, an exaggeration. "We're going to file this as an unfounded complaint," the older officer said, "but I'd recommend you document this interaction. Sometimes these situations escalate." He gave me a case number and suggested I consider a restraining order if the harassment continued. After they left, I sat on my couch, shaking. "She called the police on me," I said to Melissa, still not quite believing it. "She lied to the police." Melissa's face was grim. "This is the escalation I was worried about. She's not just rewriting history anymore. She's trying to create an official narrative where you're the bad guy. You need to protect yourself legally, Nathan. This is serious." Monday morning, I called Patricia Nguyen again. She fit me in for an emergency session that afternoon, and when I showed her everything, the emails, the police report, the social media posts, the messages from friends who'd heard Olivia's version of events, her expression grew increasingly concerned. "Nathan, I'm going to be direct with you," she said, leaning forward in her office chair. Patricia was in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked black hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible relationship disaster. "What you're describing is a pattern of behavior that could potentially lead to false allegations. I've seen cases where an emotional affair gets discovered, and the guilty party goes on the offensive to protect their reputation by destroying the other person's credibility. You need to build a comprehensive record of everything that's happened." I spent the next several days following Patricia's instructions. I created a detailed timeline with dates, times, and witnesses. And I backed up all the emails and screenshots to 3 different locations. I contacted friends who'd witnessed our relationship, asking them to write statements about what they'd observed. My friend David from work immediately sent a 3-page email documenting every time I'd mentioned relationship problems, every time Olivia had called me during work hours, every observation he'd made. My neighbor, Mrs. Catherine Walsh, a retired family court judge who lived across the hall, provided a statement about the night Olivia left, confirming she'd seen Olivia leave voluntarily with packed bags, appearing upset, but not fearful or coerced. I reached out to Jenna again, and after some hesitation, she agreed to provide a statement about the discrepancies between what Olivia had told her and what the evidence showed. "I feel terrible," Jenna said over the phone, "but I can't enable lies. What she's doing to you isn't right." The picture that emerged from all these statements was stark. A woman who'd been living a double life for months, who'd been caught, and who was now attempting to gaslight everyone around her into believing she was the victim. On Wednesday, exactly 2 weeks after I'd discovered the first message, I received an email from a lawyer I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Cease and desist. Harassment of Ms. Olivia Grant." My hands went numb as I opened it. The letter, signed by attorney Michael Foster of Foster and Associates, claimed I had been stalking, harassing, and threatening Olivia, that I had unlawfully accessed her private communications, and that I was spreading defamatory statements about her character. It demanded I cease all contact immediately, delete all illegally obtained materials, and issue a public apology, or face legal action. I forwarded the letter to Patricia immediately. She called me back within an hour, her voice tight with anger. "This is a slap suit threat, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're trying to intimidate you into silence. Don't respond directly. Let me handle this." Patricia drafted a response that was a masterpiece of legal precision. She outlined the timeline of events, attached evidence of Olivia's emotional affair, included the police report showing the false complaint, and made it clear that I had every right to share factual information about my own relationship with my own support network. She concluded by noting that any actual lawsuit would likely result in counterclaims for defamation and abuse of process. "I CC'd this to the Oregon State Bar's Ethics Committee," Patricia said when she sent me a copy. "Attorney Foster needs to know he's representing someone making false claims and that there will be professional consequences for threatening baseless litigation." The response had an immediate effect. The next day, I received a terse email from Foster's office stating they were reevaluating their representation of Ms. Grant pending further investigation. Translation: they'd looked at the evidence and realized their client had lied to them. That same afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Nathan Whitmore?" a male voice asked. "This is Detective James Morrison with the Portland Police Department, Fraud Division. I'd like to talk to you about a complaint we received." My heart stopped. Another complaint. More lies. "What kind of complaint?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Actually, it's about a complaint you filed, or rather, about a false police report filed against you. The officers who responded to your residence flagged it for investigation after determining the initial allegations were unfounded. We're looking into whether charges should be filed against the complainant." I met Detective Morrison at a coffee shop in downtown Portland the next morning. He was in his early 40s, wearing a tired expression and a wedding ring that looked like it had seen better days. "I've been doing this for 19 years, he said after we sat down with our coffee, "and I can usually spot a false report within the first few minutes of investigation. The officers who responded to your address did good work documenting the inconsistencies." He pulled out a tablet, showed me the official report. "What concerns me is the pattern. Your girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, called 911 claiming you were holding her hostage and making threats. But when officers arrived, you were cooperative, had a credible witness present, and provided substantial documentation showing her claims were false. Then, days later, she hired an attorney to threaten you with legal action for harassment. These are classic tactics of someone trying to create a paper trail to support a false narrative. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying me. I need to ask you directly. Is there anything you've done that could be construed as threatening or harassing? Any messages, any contact since she left? I pulled out my phone, showed him the complete record of communications. There were exactly 3 text messages from me to Olivia, all sent the day after she left. One asking if she wanted to arrange a time to get her things, one providing Patricia's contact information for coordinating the logistics, and one saying I hoped she was safe and that I wished her well. Nothing else. No calls, no social media messages. Complete silence otherwise. Morrison nodded slowly. That's what I thought. You lawyered up immediately and did everything right. Smart. He paused, then continued. Here's what I need you to understand. I'm opening a formal investigation into the false police report. If I find sufficient evidence, and based on what I've seen so far, I'll be recommending charges. Filing a false police report is a Class A misdemeanor in Oregon, punishable by up to a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. But more than that, it creates a permanent record that can impact future credibility if she ever makes other accusations. The weight of what Morrison was saying hit me fully. This wasn't just relationship drama anymore. This was criminal justice system involvement, potential charges, permanent records. What do you need from me? I asked. Morrison spent the next hour walking me through everything. He took copies of all my documentation, recorded my statement, asked detailed questions about the timeline. He was particularly interested in the emails between Olivia and Alex, the false narrative she'd spread to friends and family, and the lawyer's cease and desist letter. This shows intent, he said, tapping on the lawyer's letter on his tablet. She's not just reacting defensively. She's actively trying to construct a false reality and silence anyone who might contradict it. That's malicious, not mistaken. Before we parted, Morrison gave me his card and a warning. In my experience, when people are this committed to their false narrative, they don't stop just because one tactic fails. They escalate. If she contacts you, if anyone contacts you on her behalf, if anything unusual happens, you call me immediately. Understood? I promised I would, though part of me still couldn't believe this was real. The woman I'd planned to marry, the woman whose laugh had made me fall in love, had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of lying to police, of weaponizing the legal system, of trying to destroy my reputation to protect her own secrets. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Olivia had smiled at me, told me she loved me, made plans for our future, all while complaining about me to her ex-boyfriend, all while building a relationship in the shadows that meant more to her than the one we shared in the light. The investigation moved quickly after that. Detective Morrison was thorough, interviewing Jenna, David, Mrs. Walsh, and even reaching out to some of Olivia's other friends. What he found painted an even more disturbing picture than I'd known. One of Olivia's co-workers, a woman named Rita Jameson who taught 4th grade at the same elementary school, contacted Morrison directly after hearing through the grapevine that there was an investigation. Rita told him that Olivia had been complaining about me at work for months, but that the complaints had always seemed performative, almost like she was testing narratives. She'd tell one version of a story at lunch, Rita said in her statement, which Morrison shared with me, and then tell a completely different version later that same day. It was like she was trying to see which story got more sympathy. Rita also mentioned something that made my blood run cold. About a month before our breakup, Olivia had asked Rita about school policies regarding restraining orders and whether having one would affect her employment. At the time, I thought maybe she was asking for a student's parent, Rita said. Now I wonder if she was planning this all along. Morrison pulled phone records with Olivia's consent, or rather, he informed her that he could subpoena them if she didn't provide them voluntarily, and she chose to comply rather than fight it. The records showed something stunning. She'd been in contact with Alex an average of 35 times per day. Calls, texts, video chats. Some conversations lasted hours. On the night she'd claimed to be at girls' night, there were no calls to Jenna or any of her other female friends. There were, however, 3 hours of call time with Alex's number. The evidence was overwhelming, but what Morrison said next shocked me. I also contacted the Boston PD to run a background check on Alex, see if there's a history there. Morrison met me at my apartment 3 days later, with news that fundamentally changed my understanding of everything. Alex isn't just an ex-boyfriend, Morrison said, spreading out documents on my kitchen table. His full name is Alexander Bennett, and he has a history. 2 prior relationships ended with restraining orders, not against him, but filed by him against the ex-girlfriends. Both cases were dismissed after investigation showed the women had fabricated allegations. There's also a sealed juvenile record I can't access, but the pattern suggests he's done this before. I stared at the documents, not understanding. Done what before? Morrison looked at me like I was missing something obvious. Coached women into making false allegations. Look at the pattern. Emotional affair builds emotional dependency. Then he helps construct a narrative where the current partner is abusive or dangerous. Then the woman files reports or gets restraining orders, and boom, relationship over, woman vulnerable and isolated, and Alex is there to save her. It's a manipulation tactic. I've seen it 3 times in my career, always with someone who has narcissistic personality traits and a savior complex. The implications made me feel sick. You think he's been planning this? Deliberately trying to destroy my relationship with Olivia so he could what? Get her back? Morrison shrugged. I think he saw an opportunity when Olivia reached out to reconnect, and he's been systematically undermining your relationship ever since. The emails you showed me, he never once told her to work things out with you, did he? Never suggested couples counseling, never encouraged healthy communication. He just validated every complaint and positioned himself as the better alternative. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. I thought back through all the emails I'd read, and Morrison was right. Every single message from Alex had subtly reinforced the idea that I was inadequate, that Olivia deserved better, that the relationship was doomed. So what happens now? I asked. Morrison gathered the documents. Now I finish my investigation and present my findings to the DA's office. Based on what I have, I'm recommending charges against Olivia for filing a false police report. I'm also going to recommend they look into potential conspiracy charges involving Alex, though that's harder to prove. And I'm going to make sure everyone involved understands that this was a coordinated effort to harass you and damage your reputation. He paused at the door. One more thing. I spoke with the lawyer who sent you that cease and desist letter, Michael Foster. Once he saw the evidence, he withdrew from representation immediately and filed a complaint with the bar against himself for failing to adequately investigate his client's claims before sending legal threats. He asked me to tell you he's sorry. Apparently, Olivia told him you'd been stalking her for months, showed him fake text messages she'd created, whole fabricated narrative. He feels like he was used as a weapon. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. The DA's office charged Olivia with filing a false police report and added a count of criminal defamation based on the provably false statements she'd made about me to multiple people. She hired a new lawyer, entered a not guilty plea, and tried to argue that she genuinely believed I was a threat because of her emotional state. The problem with that defense was the evidence. Prosecutors had the emails showing her calculated planning, the phone records showing the coordination with Alex, and witness statements showing she'd told different stories to different people based on what would generate the most sympathy. The preliminary hearing was on a Friday in early November, and I sat in the courtroom watching Olivia testify. She looked small and scared in her professional teaching clothes, and part of me, the part that had loved her, felt sorry for her. But then she opened her mouth and started lying under oath. She claimed she'd never meant to mislead police, that she'd been confused and frightened when she made the call. She claimed the emails with Alex were taken out of context and that they were just friends providing mutual support. She claimed I'd been emotionally manipulative throughout our relationship and that she'd been afraid of my reaction to the breakup. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Foster, no relation to Michael, tried to make me look bad on cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Mr. Whitmore, that you violated Miss Grant's privacy by accessing her email without permission?" she asked. I'd been prepared for this. Patricia had coached me extensively. I accessed an email account on a shared laptop in my own home, using a password that Ms. Grant had freely given me after observing suspicious behavior. Once I saw evidence of infidelity, I documented it. I didn't hack anything, break into anything, or violate any laws. Diana Foster pressed on. But you distributed those private emails to multiple people, didn't you? Friends, family, even the police? I shared factual evidence of my own relationship with people who had been told lies about me and with law enforcement after a false police report was filed against me. I have a right to defend my reputation with truth. Judge Lawrence Benedict, a stern man in his 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense courtroom management, interrupted. "Counselor, unless you're prepared to argue that truth is not a defense to defamation, I suggest you move on." The turning point came when the prosecution called Detective Morrison to testify. He walked the court through his entire investigation, presenting the evidence methodically and professionally. When he got to the part about Alex's history, Olivia's face went white. "Your Honor," Morrison said, "the evidence shows a clear pattern of manipulation by Mr. Bennett, who has a documented history of this exact behavior. He systematically isolated Ms. Grant emotionally from her partner, reinforced negative perceptions, and coached her toward making false allegations. We have text messages between Miss Grant and Mr. Bennett where he specifically suggests she should document everything in case Nathan gets violent, despite no evidence that Mr. Whitmore had ever been violent or threatening." The prosecution then played a recording that made the entire courtroom go silent. It was a voicemail Alex had left for Olivia 3 days after she moved out. Morrison had obtained it through a warrant on Olivia's phone records. In the message, Alex's voice was cold and calculating. "Hey, Liv, just checking in. Remember what we talked about. You need to establish a pattern of fear for your own protection. Make sure people see you're afraid of him. The police report was good, but you need more. Talk to a therapist, get it documented. If he pushes back, we can use that too. I've got your back, babe. Always have." Olivia's lawyer immediately requested a recess. When they came back 20 minutes later, Diana Foster approached the bench. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea to no contest and accept whatever sentence the court deems appropriate." The plea deal was worked out over the next week. Olivia would plead no contest to filing a false police report, receive a suspended sentence of 6 months in jail, be placed on probation for 2 years, be required to complete 200 hours of community service, attend mandatory therapy, and issue a formal public apology clarifying that her allegations against me were false. The apology was posted on her social media accounts on a Monday morning 3 weeks later. It was brief, but clear. I made false statements about Nathan Whitmore to friends, family, and law enforcement. These statements were not true. Nathan never threatened me, never harassed me, and never acted inappropriately. I allowed myself to be manipulated into believing and spreading lies that damaged his reputation. I am deeply sorry for the harm I caused. The comments section filled up within minutes. Some people were supportive of Olivia, saying she'd been manipulated and deserved forgiveness. Others were harsh, calling her malicious and calculating. I didn't read much of it. I'd asked Patricia to monitor it for me and let me know if anything required legal response, but otherwise, I was done. I was tired of thinking about Olivia, tired of the whole mess, just tired. The criminal charges against Alex were more complicated. He lived in Massachusetts, which created jurisdictional issues, but the Boston DA's office was interested in the case because of his history. They charged him with criminal harassment and conspiracy to file a false police report. His trial wouldn't happen for months, maybe longer, but Morrison assured me that the evidence was strong. "He's done this before," Morrison said when he called to update me. "We've connected him to at least 3 other cases with similar patterns. This time, he's not walking away." I tried to move on with my life. I threw myself into work, picked up projects I'd been putting off, started hiking alone on weekends again. Melissa checked in regularly, worried about my mental state, but honestly, I felt oddly calm. The truth was out. The lies had been exposed. My reputation had been damaged, but not destroyed, and the people who mattered most had stood by me. 3 months after the hearing, I ran into Jenna at a farmer's market downtown. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but I walked over anyway. "Hey," I said. "How are you?" She shifted her reusable shopping bag from one hand to the other. "I'm okay. I'm really sorry, Nathan. About all of it. I should have questioned her story more. Should have trusted my own judgment instead of just believing her." I shrugged. "You were being a good friend. She lied to you too." Jenna hesitated, then said, "I stopped talking to her, if you're wondering. After everything came out, after I saw what she did, I can't be friends with someone like that." She looked at me directly. "She's still in contact with Alex, you know. Even after all this. She moved to Boston last month to be with him." Something about that information should have hurt, but it didn't. It just felt inevitable, like watching a car crash in slow motion that you knew was coming. "I hope she's happy," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wished her well exactly, but because I didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem, wasn't my responsibility, wasn't even a person I thought about unless someone brought her up. Jenna smiled sadly. "You're too good for her. You always were." I met someone new 6 months later. Her name was Catherine. Yes, like my neighbor, Mrs. Walsh, which we both found amusing, and she was a landscape architect who'd just moved to Portland from Seattle. We met at a rock climbing gym, started talking about our favorite trails, and ended up getting coffee afterward. On our 3rd date, I told her everything about Olivia, about the false allegations, about the trial. I decided early on that I wouldn't hide it, wouldn't pretend it didn't happen, because anyone who Googled my name would find the news articles anyway. Catherine listened to the whole story without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "That sounds awful," she finally said. "I'm sorry you went through that." I waited for the inevitable questions, the doubt, the concern that maybe there was more to the story. But Catherine just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for telling me. I can tell it wasn't easy to talk about." That was it. No drama, no suspicion, no judgment. Just simple human compassion. We've been together for 9 months now, and it's different than anything I had with Olivia. There's no second guessing, no hidden conversations, no feeling like I'm competing with someone else for her attention. Catherine is direct, honest, sometimes brutally so, and I love that about her. When she's unhappy about something, she tells me immediately. When she's happy, she shows it. There's no performance, no manipulation, just 2 people trying to build something real together. I still think about that night sometimes, about finding those messages at 3:18 a.m., about the cascade of disasters that followed. Detective Morrison was right about one thing. People who are committed to their false narratives don't stop until they're forced to stop. Olivia didn't stop until the legal system made her, until the consequences became too severe to ignore. I heard through the grapevine that she lost her teaching job, not because of the criminal charges, but because parents found out and didn't want someone with a documented history of false allegations working with their children. I heard that she and Alex got engaged, but then broke up 6 months later when she caught him doing the same thing to her that he'd done to me, building an emotional affair with someone else while systematically undermining her confidence. There's probably a lesson in there about karma or justice or the universe balancing itself out, but I don't spend much time thinking about it. Mrs. Walsh, my neighbor, the retired family court judge who'd helped me by providing a statement, told me something once that stuck with me. We were having coffee in her apartment about a year after everything ended. and I mentioned that I still felt angry sometimes about how much time and energy I'd wasted on someone who'd betrayed me so thoroughly. "You didn't waste it," Mrs. Walsh said, stirring honey into her tea with slow, deliberate movements. "You invested it in good faith. The fact that your investment wasn't returned doesn't diminish the value of what you offered. You loved authentically, trusted reasonably, and when you discovered the truth, you handled it with integrity. The only person who wasted anything was Olivia, and what she wasted was your trust, which, let me tell you, after 40 years on the bench, is one of the most valuable things a person can give." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "You did everything right, Nathan. You documented instead of reacting emotionally. You sought professional help instead of trying to handle it alone. You told the truth instead of creating counter-narratives, and you let the system work instead of taking matters into your own hands. That takes tremendous character, especially for someone who'd been so deeply betrayed." Her words helped more than she knew, because the truth was, I had felt stupid for a long time. Stupid for not seeing the signs earlier, stupid for trusting someone who was lying to my face, stupid for believing that our relationship was what I thought it was. But Mrs. Walsh was right. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd loved someone who didn't deserve it, and when I found out, I'd handled it the right way. The last time I heard anything about Olivia was about 18 months after the trial. Detective Morrison called to tell me that the charges against Alex had been resolved. He'd pleaded guilty to multiple counts of harassment and conspiracy and received a 2-year prison sentence. "He'll probably serve 18 months with good behavior," Morrison said, "but more importantly, he's now on the radar. If he tries this again with anyone else, there's a record, a pattern. He won't be able to manipulate the system the way he did before." I thanked Morrison for everything he'd done, for taking the case seriously, for not dismissing it as just relationship drama. "You made it easy," he said. "You came prepared with evidence, you were credible, and you didn't try to embellish or exaggerate. Half my job is sorting through emotional noise to find the facts. You presented facts. That's rare." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sun set over Portland, Catherine reading beside me, her feet tucked under her on the patio chair. I thought about writing this all down, documenting it not just for legal purposes but for myself, to process everything that had happened. But then Catherine looked up from her book and smiled at me, just a simple, genuine smile, and I realized I didn't need to. The story was over. I'd lived through it, learned from it, and come out the other side. Some part of me would always carry the scars, the instinctive flinch when someone picked up their phone at odd hours, the brief moment of doubt when Catherine said she was going out with friends, the automatic mental cataloging of evidence and inconsistencies. But those scars were getting smaller, fading into the background of a life that was moving forward. 2 years after that Thursday night when everything changed, I was promoted to senior developer at work. Catherine and I moved into a house together in the suburbs, one with a big backyard where she could experiment with native plant gardens and I could set up a workshop. We adopted a rescue dog named Murphy, who had anxiety issues and bonded with me immediately, probably because he sensed a kindred spirit. Life became normal in the way that normal is actually extraordinary. Predictable, stable, safe. The kind of normal where the biggest drama is whether we're having tacos or pasta for dinner, where trust is assumed rather than constantly proven, where love is expressed through mundane daily acts rather than grand gestures meant to obscure deeper betrayals. I'm not sure what happened to Olivia after Alex went to prison. I don't look her up, don't check her social media, don't ask mutual acquaintances. She's a chapter that's closed, a lesson that's been learned, a person who no longer has any power over my life or my happiness. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven her, and I never quite know how to answer that question. Forgiveness implies that what happened still matters to me, that I'm actively choosing to release resentment or anger. The truth is simpler, and maybe less noble. I just don't think about her anymore. She's become like a book I read once, interesting at the time, but not something I'd ever pick up again. The ending is what it is. There was no dramatic final confrontation, no tearful apology that changed anything, no Hollywood moment of closure. There was just the slow, grinding process of the legal system, the gradual fading of anger into indifference, and the quiet building of something better with someone else. If there's anything I'd want people to take from this story, it's this. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't let someone gaslight you into doubting your own perception of reality. Document everything, seek help from professionals, and never let someone convince you that protecting yourself is the same thing as being controlling or paranoid. And maybe most importantly, not everyone who says they love you actually does. Some people love the idea of you, the convenience of you, the way you make them feel about themselves. Real love is consistent, transparent, and doesn't require you to compete with ghosts from the past or shadows in the present. Real love doesn't make you feel crazy for noticing inconsistencies. Real love doesn't require you to defend your own sanity. I learned all of that the hard way, at 3:18 in the morning on a Thursday, when a phone lit up in the darkness and everything I thought I knew turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. But I also learned that the truth, once exposed, has a power that no amount of manipulation can overcome. That doing the right thing, even when it's hard, leads to better outcomes than taking shortcuts or seeking revenge. That the justice system, for all its flaws, sometimes actually works the way it's supposed to. And that there are people in the world, like Detective Morrison, Patricia Nguyen, my sister Melissa, my neighbor Mrs. Walsh, my friend David, who will stand up for what's right even when it's not easy or convenient. Those lessons were expensive, paid for with months of stress and emotional turmoil, but they were worth it. Because now, sitting in my backyard with Catherine and Murphy, watching the late afternoon light filter through the trees she planted, I know exactly what real love looks like. And it looks nothing like what I had with Olivia. It looks like this: quiet, steady, honest, and home. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.